Namaste. So, in the previous video, I was explaining paragraph 11, and now it's time to read paragraph 12 from the first section of Karl Marx's text, The Communist Manifesto. Before I read paragraph 12, I'd like to go back to paragraph 11 and say something important there. Let me read it first. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and exchange. What we need to understand here is that the bourgeoisie, or the middle class, or the business class, or the money making class, or the profit making class, is a class, group of people, a sect in society, a section in society. How does it develop? Or how did this class come to exist? How did this class come to develop? How did it develop over the centuries? Then Marx says that the bourgeois class developed as a result of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and exchange. Focus on the phrase modes of production and exchange and understand this word. Mode means the way of doing something. Pattern of production and exchange means the way things were produced in society and the way things were distributed or exchanged in society. This means the economy, the economic mode, economic aspect. So what do we need to understand? The economic aspect and the social aspect go together. With the change of economy, there takes place a change in the social structure also. To make it simpler, economy is about the material reality. When the material changes, there is a change in class. Or let's say, when the material reality changes, the ideology changes or thinking changes or class structure changes. So, economy and culture go parallel. A change in the economy brings a change in the culture. There's an expression, there are two words in Marxism, the base structure and the superstructure. What does the base structure mean? Base structure means the economic realities, the material realities, the ground realities. What does superstructure means? The cultural ideology, religious ideology, literary ideology, the thinking. Your economic foundation determines your attitude, outlook, world outlook, and thinking. Now, Marx says that the bourgeoisie thinking, the bourgeoisie ideology developed as a product of the revolutions in the modes of production and exchange. Let me take you back to the paragraphs and explain you what he's trying to say here. I would like to take you to a paragraph here. Let me show which paragraph I want to talk about. Okay. Let me take you to paragraph 6. And I want to show you how each change in the mode of production has led to a new class formation. For example, we know that in the ancient we had feudal system. There were landowners, feudal lords. And just opposite to these feudal lords were the serfs or the slaves. The lords were the theses, let's say. The serfs or the slaves were the antithesis, let's say. Lords were the oppressors, the serfs or the slaves were the oppressed. Lords exploited, and the slaves got exploited. So, who were the serfs? Who is a serf? If you check meaning, it's given here. I guess it's not given. A serf is a person or was a person who used to work for the landlord but didn't get money payment, rather got food to survive and protection. In a sense, serf was a free labor for the landlord. So the landlord owned the land, the serf did not own any land. Now, what happened that later on, the landlord gave some land to the serfs, and legally the serf was made the owner of the land, right? Now, when the serfs or the slaves got some land of their own from the landlord, they were given this ownership through a charter. A charter is a, a legal written document. They were legally given the ownership of the land. Then they began to live at a certain place because a land belonged to them. Now, this land which belonged to them and the people living in that land, they began to be called as chartered burghers. Now, who is a chartered burgher? A serf, someone who owns a piece of land and lives there. Now, as a number of chartered burghers began to live together, then that place began to be called as a burgess. A burgess is a vicinity or locality or a place where, let's say, 10, 15, 11, a bunch of a group of people live together and they own the land where they're living. Now, these burgesses, where the serfs lived as owners of the land, when more and more burgesses began to be formed in course of time, these burgesses developed into earliest towns. And we all understand that towns means a hub of business activity. Please remember that farming is not the feature of town. Farming is the feature of villages. Towns are known for economic activity, business activity. Now the question comes, who did this economic activity, business activity? These serfs who changed into burghers. Now they who were living in the towns, they started merchandise. They began to sell goods, buy goods, exchange goods. They began to make items of consumption and they began to sell these items to people who came to the town. So it is from these serfs that the first elements of the middle class sprang. So the bourgeois emerged from the serfs. Now the serfs, now look, the mode of production and the class. When we had the class of the serfs, what was the mode of production? The mode of production was feudal. The serfs would work in the field for the landlord, and they were uh, even not wage laborers, they were slaves. But when these serfs came to towns or developed towns and business activity started, now the mode of production and exchange changed. Earlier, production was done by slaves for the landlord. Now, production was done by businessmen for the consumers in the towns. Now, the mode of production and exchange changed. Now, with the change in the mode of production and exchange, the social class changed. How? The serfs developed into townsmen, or middle class, right? Now, if you go down, now this middle class who was living in the town and who was living in the markets and who produced goods and distributed them, exchanged them, and made money. Over the centuries, it developed into a stronger business class. particularly as Marx says, the discovery of America facilitated the growth of business class. The discovery of the uh, Cape, the route to navigate around the world bypassing Muslim countries. Cape is a place in South Africa. So now ships could go around the world without getting into Muslim countries. Please understand that America and the America-led allies, they were Christian countries. And when they had to go through Muslim countries for business, there was difficulties. So they were looking for a route to go around the world for business transactions without getting into Muslim countries. So when they discovered this route through the Cape, then it was the business activity increased. Second, third, the East Indian Company, which was a British company uh, from Great Britain, they were involved in business. The Chinese market, which was a very fertile place to sell goods. In the same way, America colonized many countries, Britain colonized America, and the colonizing countries did business with the colonized small countries. So business grew, and there was more distribution of goods, more exchange of goods, and commodities, and this activity, this economic activity, gave rise to commerce and navigation going down the world and industry. And as the modes of production and exchange changed, the bourgeois class began to develop and grow further and further very fast. The feudal society disappeared and the middle class society developed. Second step. Now, if you go to paragraph 8, you will see that there was the feudal mode of production. In feudal mode of production, the production was monopolized by closed guilds, and the production was slow. So markets were growing, population was growing. So this slow production could not meet the rising demand. As a result, what happened? To meet this growing demand of the market, the middle class took over the feudal system of industry, and feudal system of industry were replaced by manufacturing system of industries, right? And when feudal system or feudal mode of production was replaced by manufacturing mode of production, the bourgeois class developed further with a new strength, right? Now, with the replacement of the feudal industry by the middle class owned manufacturing industry, the guild masters were pushed aside, and uh, the labor between the different corporate guilds were replaced by labor division within a workshop. There was further division of labor, which hastened the growth of goods. If you go to paragraph 9, you will see that uh, markets were growing, population was rising, markets were growing, and demand was increasing. As a result, even the manufacturing class, manufacturing mode of production was not enough to supply the growing demand. When the manufacturers failed to supply the growing demand, then what happened? The manufacturing system was replaced by industrial production system. And the characteristic of industrial production system was that in industrial production system, industries were opened and machinery was used, steam was used, and machine was used. Two things: steam engines and machineries were used in industrial production. With the change in the mode of production, from feudal mode of production, we came to manufacturing mode of production. From manufacturing mode of production, we came to industrial mode of production. And when we came to industrial mode of production, we had industrial class now, industrial business class. Now look, as the mode of production changes, the bourgeois becomes more and more powerful. The bourgeois becomes a stronger and stronger class. Now, on one side, we had modern industry, and side by side, we had modern industrial class. What was the mode of production? What was the mode of production? The mode of production was modern industry. What was the class? The class was modern industrial middle class. Now, this modern industrial middle class was industrial millionaire. They had millions of rupees with them, and they were the leaders of industrial armies. Few people own dozens, hundreds of factories, right? And these modern industrial millionaires who ran the modern industrial mode of production, they became the modern bourgeois. So do you see, as the mode of production changes, at the same time, the class also changes and the bourgeois class develops further and further and further from the serfs to the burghers, to the townsmen, to the initial bourgeois. Then they become industrialists. Then they become modern industrialists. Then they become millionaires, and then they become billionaires, modern bourgeois. And if you come to paragraph 10, you will see that again the modern industrial production system also failed to supply the growing demand. As a result, world market developed, multinational companies developed, and when the mode of production and work and exchange became global, when the mode of production and exchange became global, worldwide, multinational, then we had the new class of bourgeois, the global bourgeois. Now the bourgeois was everywhere in the world, every country, every corner, every place. Now we have world's richest people now, right? And America facilitated all this process of the development of the bourgeois. How? Through communication by land, air, and water, through railway networks, and other information and communication networks, right? As a result, what happened with the globalization? Factories extended to multiple countries. Thousands and thousands of factories were opened. Industries were opened. The more industries were opened, there was more economic activity. And the more economic activity, there was more money made by the bourgeois. And the more money the bourgeois made, the more powerful the bourgeois became. As a result, the, the serf, the bourgeois, that developed from the slaves of the middle class, middle ages, the bourgeois that developed from the serfs or slaves of the middle ages, whom the landlord gave his land, this serf, this slave today, the modern bourgeois, has become the most powerful, the most oppressive, and the most exploiting class of modern society. So, do you see, as the mode of production changes from the burgesses to the global market, the serfs or the slaves also developed from serfs to the modern bourgeois. Paragraph 11 then he concludes that the modern bourgeois, thus in this way, the modern bourgeois is the product of a long course of development, product of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. So I was explaining you this 11th paragraph once again, and I took you back to paragraph 6. I read paragraph 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Reading these 5 paragraphs, I made you understand how the modern bourgeois developed from the Middle Ages serfs. How? By changing the modes of production and exchange. The point I was making you understand is that when the material realities change, the world outlook or the ideology also changes. What is material reality? The base structure. When the economic foundation, when the economic foundation changes, when economic relations change, when modes of production change, social relations change, and when social relations change, a new class is born. By social relation means, when economic production changes, then how people get items to consume, how they sell, how they buy, this whole changes. Today, do you see farmers no more carry vegetable on their shoulders and go door by door? Today, we have bhat button in supermarket. Farmers are helpless. They sell at a very cheaper price to supermarkets, and supermarkets pay meager money to the farmers. and they sell these items at a very high price and they take all the profit. This is the relationship. Now today we consumers no more go to the field of the farmer to buy the vegetable. We go to the supermarket, and the potato or the vegetable you are eating today might have come to your supermarket from seven seas across. Who knows, right? So the whole relation among the people has changed and new class is born. The question that you might get in the examination based on these five, six paragraphs is this one. This one. Explain in detail how the bourgeois is the product of a long course of development or a product of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. This may be a 8 marks long question. Hope you understand. Play the video again, pause the video, read the text and understand and prepare for the exam. Thank you so much.